Hi, my name is Steve Dembo, and today we're going to be talking about 3D printing. We're going to go over some of the nuts and bolts and the mechanics of it, and then also talking about philosophically, how do we use it in the classroom, and what are educators doing with 3D printers in their classrooms around the country.
All right, so
Practice use.
I've got in this presentation at least 60 minutes, well more than 60 minutes worth of material, okay? There's a lot to talk about, and I'm going to try and find like sort of that right balance between the nuts and the bolts, the mechanics of it, because I think there are a lot of things that people kind of don't understand about the process that are important to understand because they have an impact on how you use it with students, or at least how to use it well with students. And then we're going to devote about hopefully half the time on projects and like what teachers are actually doing with it and some of the creative ways educators are making use of it. That said, if you guys have specific questions, I don't want to like take a chance that we don't hear them. You know what I mean? So I strongly encourage you to interrupt. I strongly encourage you to jump in at any time, or even let's just front load it. Are there any, I mean, you guys are here for a reason, right? It might just be idle curiosity. It might just be because you think I'm that handsome. I get it. But do any of you actually have any specific questions that you know you want to walk away having answered before we leave? Yeah.
Just different, we're new at it, we know Tinkercad, but I don't really know other software.
For creating.
For creating,
We'll,
yes.
we'll cover a couple different ones, yeah.
When I do dual extrusion, it's a mess. Like parts of one color, lead to another, and lead pieces of another color.
So why are you doing dual extrusion?
Like multiple color.
No, I know what it is. It's to do multicolored printing.
Yeah.
That's the main reason. Okay, we'll talk. I actually have that more on the tail end of extras because for most people aren't at that point yet.
Okay.
You're already over here, but I'll try and make sure that we get to some of that.
Okay.
What printer are you using?
Flag 4
Okay. But the main reason is for multicolored.
Yeah.
Okay. Because there's a few reasons to use dual extrusion. Yeah.
I think this is way beyond what you're going to be able to get to, and I'm a brand new beginner. But
Oh, you're asking if I'm okay?
yeah,
I'm totally fine.
thank you.
Yeah.
But I'm interested in learning how to use this to print watersheds with using GIS data to make watershed 3D watershed maps.
All right. Explain. Oh, forgive me. What's a watershed map?
Okay, so like a topography,
Yeah.
ground topography, you have data, digital elevation models, and GIS. And I know you can do this with 3D printing, but I know it's probably way beyond what we're getting to today, and you certainly couldn't get to that in an hour.
No.
That's what my ultimate goal is.
I absolutely know that you can do it, and I know I have a friend who is doing it. I haven't spent any time yet looking into that, so I have nothing for you at all, except that I can definitely make sure that we can follow up, and I can get you that information and connect you with somebody who's been doing that already.
That would
Because
be,
it's so for just basically taking topographical data and basically building 3D models off of that and actually creating them. It's cool stuff. Yeah. So yeah,
I actually know nothing, except I know what it is, but that's it. So
you're
am I in
right there at the
place?
bottom. You are totally in the right place.
I am on the bottom.
We are going to start. I got to assume that at least some people are in the same boat as you. So we are going to. No, I do, because a lot of people know that they feel like they should be doing it, but they haven't started that path yet. And I'll be honest, until you actually have a 3D printer in front of you and start using it, your mind, the way you think about it and what you actually want to do is often very different. So we're going to go through it soup to nuts. Okay, we were starting off just with, I have an hour's worth of material. I probably won't get through all of it. I'm going to give you the link in just a second, so you're going to get to all of it. But just, are there any? You came here for a reason. Are there any specific questions that you definitely want to, topics that you definitely want to cover? Yeah.
We have one in it. Mine's more about like problem solving with 3D printer, like it doesn't work in the time that it takes and managing all of that.
The troubleshooting, I keep wanting to say using it effectively, but it's not using it, optimizing the process.
Yeah, and then like dealing with misprints and trying to figure out, all right, misprinted, so what is this problem?
Okay, we're going to cover several pieces along those lines. All right, so first things first, same link for all of my presentations. If you were in any of my other sessions and you already wrote down this URL, it's the exact same one. This takes you to my blog, a specific page of my blog just for this conference. It has the opening keynote, it has today's keynote from this morning, it has my other 2 sessions that I did in their entirety. Every slide that I'm showing, every slide that we showed this morning, and so on and so forth. And it's also where I do my blogging, when I'm blogging. There's also, just if you forget my contact information, that contact link on the side here, that goes straight into my email. You know what I mean? It's not some just random bots or anything like that. So if you want to reach out, if you want me to come to your district or talk to your school board, do anything else along those lines, just that's the same, use the same link and you'll get to the same place. And if you forget to write anything else down, you can get back to the slides later, including the stuff we're not going to get to, okay? Do I need to get into the why of 3D printing? Because I could. We could spend some time talking about how 3D printing addresses different standards in science standards and Common Core and math standards and this and that. There's an article that I linked to over there where somebody did a great job of breaking it down. Most of you, I assume, since you're in this room, we've already got some buy-in, right? You see some value or a kernel of an idea of why you might want to do it. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. I'd rather talk about what it is, why it is, how we do it, how to optimize it like we were just talking about, and how to use it in classrooms. I'm going to just clarify a few concepts, and there's a reason why I want to clarify them is because we're going to kind of build off of those. 3D printing is additive manufacturing, the ones we're talking about, most of the ones in schools. There's a lot of different types of 3D printers. Some of it sucks, does vacuum forming, some of it sucks the 3D print out of this. The ones that are in most classrooms because it's most economical are the ones like this, where it literally does one line of a print, it spits out the plastic, lifts it up by a certain amount, and then does another layer, and then lifts it up and then does another layer. That's the way it works, right? And then over time, it's going to build the entire thing upwards. It's called additive manufacturing. There are some specific styles of additive manufacturing 3D printers that's also called extrusion style, because it's extruding plastic through it. You've got the traditional Cartesian one, which is the one that most people have. That's where the bed moves forward and backward, the head moves side to side, and then there are some screws to move it upwards. But there's also this delta style, which basically has 3 arms, and as the arms move up and down, it moves the head in different places. That one is very much cheaper to go taller, much easier to go taller, so it's easier to make bigger prints, which some people like. It's also a lot faster, which is kind of nice. The only trouble is the trade-off there is it's also sloppier. It's not nearly as accurate as the other one, right? And not as many people are making them. It's a little more specialized. And then you've also got polar, which is kind of interesting, where everything that it does based off of angles and distance and so on, where that bed is constantly churning back and forth. But like I said, Cartesian is the most popular version, and the most popular one is made by this guy named Joseph Prusa. He invented something called the i3, or the rep-wrap printer, and so on. He took his idea, his model, and he took all of the plans, schematics, and so on, and software, and released it to the community, open source. So anyone could take his and copy it and make one of their own and sell. So if you do a search for 3D printers on eBay, you will find about 80% of them look exactly like that, with just small little shifts. It's all because they're basically made off of his original plans. I actually bought one from him. It's a little bit more expensive to do that. I did it for 2 reasons. One, I wanted to give back to the guy who did that kind of thing, and B, he actually, since it's his design, he doesn't cut any corners. He doesn't, you know what I mean? All the parts that you get are all the parts you need, and they're really well thought out, and they're really, really good. Here's the reality. That one right there, assembled, costs around $1,000. You want to get it cheaper? Make it yourself. It takes 8 to 12 hours. You buy it as a kit, and then you piece the whole thing together. If you can put together a bed from IKEA, you can put this together as well, okay? It's not necessarily hard. It just takes a little bit of time. That'll drop the price down to around $750-ish. If you want it even cheaper, my friend called me up. He said, I'm in the budget for a 3D printer for my kid. I want to spend $200 or $300 or $300 or $400. You can absolutely do it. You will get one that looks exactly like that. It will just have cheaper parts. So for example, the bed itself, that is a heated bed with a PEI sheet. which means we'll talk more about like heated beds and why you want them and so on and so forth, but it will work with almost everything. It'll work with almost everything, and it's easy to get the stuff off of. Now, if we took that off and we made it not a heated bed and we made it not a PEI sheet, we could knock the price down by another 100, right? That's what the cheaper printers do. That's all that they're doing. Now here's the other reality. If you start off with a $300 printer, because that's what it's going to take to get your foot in the door, every part on here is replaceable and upgradable. So you could start off with a $300 printer and then add a heated bed, or add a different type of head, or add dual extrusion and so on. After the fact, you're just choosing when you're going to spend your money. You're going to spend it up front, or you're going to build it, on your own. That's why I don't mind if people start off with a $300 printer, so long as you understand that you're not getting a Lotus, you're getting a Kia. You know what I mean? And that's fine. If you're perfectly happy with the Kia, then there's nothing wrong with it. You just know you're not going to get the luxury. It's not going to be all done for you. You're going to have to add your own GPS instead of the GPS being built in. You know what I mean? It's that kind of thing, and you're just making these sort of... Now, the other thing that I want to point out here is sort of just a little bit on the breakdown of this. The important thing is this is the bed, it moves back and forth, right? This is sort of like a big rubber band, like a big gear, and it kind of moves the thing side by side, and these screws move it up and down. That's all the mechanics of how it moves around. Everything else related to the 3D printer that's important is right in here. That's the hot end, that's the extruder, right? That's all the mechanics of it. That's what I've got zoomed into right here, okay? The way it works is, there is a motor at the very, very top of that black thing right there is a motor. And the motor is what grabs the plastic and pushes it down into the hot end. It comes through this, which is somewhat cool. And then this right here is a metal block. This right here, this little circle, is a heater. It's a heater. That's it. It literally just gets hot and it makes this whole metal block hot. And then right over, where is it? It's actually right over behind here. There's another sensor called a thermistor that measures how hot it is and gets it to exactly the right temperature that you want. And then this right here is the little spout, oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking on the name of it. It's the that's not the extruder, it's the spigot thingy. Nozzle, thank you. Oh my, why couldn't I think of the word nozzle? This is the nozzle, and then it pushes the plastic through here, and then when it's just coming out through here, it does it at the speed that the motor tells it, and then this moves it around so it gets all into the right places. The reason why I'm breaking that down for you like that is, once again, every one of those pieces can be replaced and can be changed, and you may want to. You may want to for some of the reasons that you guys were talking about in terms of optimization. And I'll explain why in just a second. Before I move away from this slide, any questions about this stuff? The nuts and bolts part? No? Okay. Then we'll keep going a little bit forward. By the way, this is Joseph Carusa. I mentioned RepRap. The idea is that anyone can take those plans and do it, but you can also, you see all the orange parts on these 3D printers? All of those parts were 3D printed. The idea being, once you have one 3D printer, you can actually then 3D print your next 3D printer, and then just add the motor and the hot end and the metal parts later. So every single one of these is making the next 3D printer. It's kind of cool. You can make a bigger one, you can make a smaller one, you can make one that's more your size or your shape or whatever you might want, but that's kind of the idea with them. Now the plastic itself, there's a lot of variety with the plastics, with the filament, if you will, besides just the colors. PLA is the sort of the generic. That's what most teachers wind up using. The reason is, it's pretty sturdy, it's pretty flexible, it works pretty well, it's not subject to warping very well, and so on. It's pretty simple and it just works, which is kind of nice. It works with almost every printer, and it's pretty non-toxic too, which is nice. You like that, right? ABS is another version that's very, very popular. It's basically the same material that Legos are made out of. And Legos are very sturdy. We've all stepped on one at some point, right? You know they're very resistant to breaking and to cracking and so on and so forth. They have a very high heat tolerance. However, to print ABS, you do need a heated bed. okay, in order for it to work. Basically, where you stick, in order for that first layer to stick to what you're doing, you really do need the bed to be warmed up so when the plastic hits it, it will adhere to it well, okay? So you need a heated bed. And also, a lot of people really recommend that you put a hood around it, a little glass shield around it. And that's twofold, two reasons. One, ABS can warp very easily based on temperature changes. So if you have a fan in your room and there's gonna be a breeze moving around, that can totally screw up your prints and shift things around and so on. The other reason is there has been some studies that when ABS is melting and getting spit out, it sends molecules and very, very fine pieces of ABS into the air, and it might not be good to breathe. And if you like your kids to stay living and healthy, you might not want to do that in an enclosed area. Now listen, if you've got your 3D printer in a very wide room, like a library or something like that, you're probably not going to actually have to worry about it nearly as much. But if it's in an enclosed space, a small classroom, where there's not a lot of ventilation or something like that, that is something that you need to be concerned about, right? And then you have others. I'm not going to get all into all of the exotic ones, but some of the filament is flexible. I have an example of that over here. This is called PETG. You can see this was printed by on a 3D printer, but it's totally rubbery and malleable and so on and so forth. You have nylon. You've got all sorts of other stuff. And then you got the really interesting ones that I really love. You've got metal. You can print in brass. You can print in steel. You can print in carbon fiber. Yeah, and it looks like it, and it feels like it, and it smells like it, and the brass will even tarnish like it over time. The way they do that is they actually break down brass into tiny micro components, and they put flecks of it inside the plastic. So it's basically something like I don't remember exactly what the numbers are, like 60% plastic and 40% brass. So it's kind of like a hybrid, but when it's done, it feels like the metal. And it behaves like it's pretty cool, it's pretty amazing. They have wood. Wood is the same thing. When it's coming out on your printer, it smells like a wood burning kit. It's awesome, I love it. You've got glow in the dark, you've also got conductive. So you can actually put conductive pathways inside your project, print them on the inside of the project. So you're not drilling a hole through something and putting a wire through it, you actually literally print the pathways into the actual project itself, and then it conducts electricity. It's pretty amazing, right? Now, the only trouble with all of these is, like I said, it's a mix of wood and brass and steel and carbon fiber and whatever, and some other substance, and the plastic. Those other substances are harder than plastic. So the net result is, if you have a nozzle that's stainless steel, regular stainless steel, brass is harder than stainless steel. You start shoving brass through that nozzle, and over time, it's going to wear it away. And the net result is you get something like this. This is what you want your nozzle to look like. Very straight, very angular, very precise. You push enough wood filament or glow-in-the-dark filament through a regular nozzle, and it starts to look like this. And then all of a sudden, it's not so accurate, not so precise, and you get failed prints. You know what I mean? The solution to that? Take out your nozzle and replace it with a hardened steel nozzle, or a high temperature, or different type. They make a whole bunch of different nozzles. New nozzle, like $10. It's like $10. It's no big deal if you know you need to do it. You know what I mean? You just need to know that that's an option. And so once again, you gotta optimize. If you're not doing carbon or fiber or wood or glow in the dark, you don't need to change it. But if you are, you gotta make your adjustments, right? You gotta make your adjustments. Now, I have things in order I don't want to go. I'm going to skip over to this one over here. There are a lot of different choices when it comes to the actual nozzle itself and that little pathway that gets you to the nozzle and like the filament itself. There are two sizes of filament, 1.75 and 3 millimeter. 1.75 is smaller than 3 millimeter. Why do we care? Well, let's think about this. If you're tracing a circle and you're using 1.75 millimeter, your circle will be about that thin. If it's 3 millimeter, it could be a lot thicker in the exact same amount of time. It's gonna push more plastic through, right? If you care about printing 30 objects for students in a certain amount of time, you care how much plastic it's spitting out at a time. This is one of the biggest frustrations that I found with teachers. There are two finite resources when it comes to 3D printing. money, which is used to buy your filament and all that, and time. When you do a project with 20, 25 students, 30 students, you've got to print them all. If each project takes 5 hours, that's a lot of time. If you could take that 5-hour project and get it down to 2 hours, you're saving yourself an enormous amount of time. Do the math. 1.75 versus 3 millimeter. Just by making that switch, you're going to cut your time by a decent percentage. That's it. Yeah.
But does the nozzle have to be as big as that thing?
Yes. If you switch from 1.75 to 3 millimeter, you need a nozzle that's got, well, actually, technically, it's actually the heating block, because this part screws into the heating block, and then so, but yes, you do need to make adjustments. Now, not only that, that's just the plastic coming in. What about the plastic going out? If you have a lot of plastic coming in, but still a teeny tiny little hole, you're going to bottleneck it, right? Remember, I have a .edu email. Yay! Honestly, I tried to learn it a couple times, but I haven't had a compelling reason to move from Tinkercad to that, because Tinkercad is still meeting my needs. I'm a simple man. You know what I mean? But at the same time, I also know when I butt my head up against something like that, then we can move to that one. It is a phenomenal piece of software, but it's not an easy one to learn. And then you get to BlockSCAD. So you're already familiar with BlockSCAD?
I am.
Okay.
Manchester Makerspace, and they helped us build our 3D printer school, and that's what they had us start with.
Okay.
It was a little cumbersome.
So BlockSCAD, you could do your 3D modeling, your traditional 3D modeling in it too. But then you can also create 3D models in code, like you would in Scratch. Like you can, or like Logo or something like that. You can literally do a set of instructions and then have it create 3D designs based on it. It is wicked cool, some of the things that you can do with it. It's also a little bit esoteric sometimes. I don't think it's great for a beginner. I don't think it's great for advanced. But it's also 100% unique. You know what I mean? So it's probably worth exposing people to somewhere in that continuum, but I wouldn't say this is one that everybody has to know. That everybody, once again, it's online and it's free and so on, and it's very flexible. It works with a lot of different other platforms and so on. It's good to know. It's good to experience. I don't think it's necessary, if you will. And if I were to just draw a straight line that we're going to go from here to here to here to here, it wouldn't necessarily be in one mind. It would be a detour. You know what I mean? That's my personal opinion. Anyone have any other CAD or software recommendations or feedback about your thoughts on SketchUp versus Tinkercad versus something else? Yeah.
I have a question. What do you think about like apps, like 3D app? You draw an app and then you save it. What do you think about that?
They're super cool.
Do they work?
They work. They do work. It's hard to get precise in that way. It's great for creativity and taking an idea and then seeing it in front of you, which is phenomenal. If you're trying to do something precise or practical or real, then you probably don't want to go in that route. One of my favorite ones, I have a slide at the end of this, is called Caster, Cookie Caster.
Oh, we use that.
You know that one?
Yeah.
So what's Cookie Caster?
You just make your design and it prints it out as a cookie cutter.
Yes, you literally just draw. So if I were to draw a sort of a snowman-y type shape like this, it will take this and make it 1/2 inch deep and add a lip around the edge and spit out a 3D printable file of my drawing that I could use as a cookie cutter.
And then you make the cookies for your PD thing.
You make your cookies for your, yes, which is not necessarily going to raise test scores, and yet I love it, and yet it's awesome. You know what I mean? Yeah.
What about 3D scanners? Like I've got these iPad iScan things. You can bring them into things like Tinkercad, but how does that fit with 3D printing, etc.?
So that's creating a very complex model. That first step in the process, and what's even better is when you take that you just scanned in, and then you modify it, tinker with it, tweak it, and so on and so forth, so you're kind of finding a blend to it. That's what I usually find most people doing. Like, for example, they might scan their heads, and scan the principal's head, and scan the other teacher's heads, and make a chess set of actually the people on there. So you have the school board on one side, and you have the teachers. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Totally kidding. Yeah.
Concerns about personalization with that? That's the one thing I told them they can't do is scan their head, because then you start putting heads and faces on things that aren't appropriate.
Okay, well, that could always happen. They can always take a picture of somebody and put it into Photoshop. I don't think that changes any of the conversations we've had for the past 10 years before it. It's just an appropriate use type thing. And in terms of them putting the files online, they don't have to put them online publicly. They can keep them privately or just do it all offline on the computer itself. That end of it wouldn't necessarily stress me out, but I'm also on the more liberal end of things, and I'm not in a classroom, so I don't need to worry about it. But I would get why you might be concerned. I would have that conversation and explore it. Grab 5 other teachers, grab an administrator, grab somebody else, and talk about it. This is my concern. I have a voice in the back of my head that says I need to be cautious. Is it just me, or is there something valid here? You know what I mean? And figure it out. Yeah.
And one more question on the keynote, those superheroes.
Yes.
Where do those models come from?
That was part of the art class. This was a sculpture class, and so they were talking about the human form, and they were doing their own designs. That was not done in Tinkercad. I believe. I'm not even positive what software it was, but no, it was not. That was a little bit more advanced,
Okay.
and that was part of what they were learning to do. It's just instead of doing it in isolation, they did it in conjunction with
Was it like
teachers.
Sculptris?
What?
Was it like Sculptris, like that type of software?
I don't know Sculptress, but I will soon because you're going to talk. That sounds like fun. What do we say we abandon the rest of this and we'll just play with that for a while? No. All right. Yeah.
One other thing we're able to do in Tinkercad is students are making bookmarks, and if you have a high contrast image, you can convert it to what's called an SVG file online. You can take any JPEG, make it three-dimensional by converting it to an SVG file, and then import that into
Any high contrast photo, convert it to an SVG, which I'm assuming is going to strip out like the background and just get like the main.
You're just going to get like for like our school logo, for example. Okay. It'll just do the logo. You want something that's like black and white, ideally. You convert it to SVG, and Tinkercad reads that SVG and puts it in your design.
Okay, write down just a few details because I need to know more. Thank you very much. I haven't heard of that specific process, and that sounds really cool. Considering I wanted to make a fidget spinner with our school logos on each of those little spokes, and
We do that for open houses and stuff.
That sounds all kinds of awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you know what I'll do is, if he writes it up, he sends me a link to his blog post about it, along with the video screencast, the webinar that he's about to do about it for the rest of us. I will, underneath the presentation itself on that webpage, I will add a couple hyperlinks for that. Yeah, and your contact information, home address, all the rest of it too, okay? We need to know where to find you. All right, I'm going to skip forward just a little bit over to where am I right now? I'm over there. Oh, I'm just going to point this out real quick. I'm not going to dive deeply into this because this could be a 30 or 45-minute discussion in itself. There is something called Polar Cloud. Polar used to make primarily the 3D printers. They do still make some 3D printers, but they are getting out of the hardware business and are focusing more on the software and on cloud-based solutions, holistic, systemic solutions for schools revolving around 3D printers. So I'm just going to show you a little bit about what it allows, and I'm going to encourage you to do your own follow-up and exploration, because otherwise we're going to spend all of our time on it. With Polar Cloud, you can import all your users in, all the people that you want to be able to create and print and so on. You can put them into groups. They can collectively share models that they have found. So if they have something they've created, they can upload it into that and share it with the group. But they also can create inside there. It has support for BlockSCAD built directly in the platform. So from inside the platform, they can open up BlockSCAD and actually create things. And then inside the platform, they also have their own slicer. So inside the platform from the web, they can slice up their models. And now once the slicing is done, it can also select a printer from all the printers that user has permission to use.
and it can send the print job over to it remotely. You can also see who is in the queue and how far down you are. As an administrator or as a teacher, you can say those 3 students are printing next, I'm more important, and bump yours up in the queue. It even has support for cameras, so you can see every one of those printers and make sure that it's printing well, and make sure that it's not screwed up, so you don't need to pause it, and so on and so forth. Very well thought out. Very supportive of the school environment, and it's a great way to use 5, 10, 15, whatever, how many printers you have to make sure that that printing experience is not isolated to the one teacher that got the Donors Choose grant approved and then put it into their classroom and is now the sole proprietor of that printer. You know what I mean? It kind of unlocks it for everybody else. I would personally actually advocate moving it out of that classroom and into a more other place, and here's why I would advocate that. A lot of the time of 3D printing is lost, the potential printing time is lost when a print job finishes that nobody has walked over there, popped it off, and said start again. You know what I mean? A lot of time it just sits there until that teacher sees that it's done or comes back or does this. If you just teach the students to do that or the other teachers to do it, and you put the printer in a place where they can, then all of a sudden you're going to gain back all of that time. There's no sense that that teacher has to be that bottleneck. I actually wouldn't mind having the printer be out in the hallway for people to see. And anyone who's walking by, if they see that it's done, pop it off, put it over there, let the next one get started, or put it into the library, put it in the technology, put it in somewhere public so that everybody is empowered to take ownership of that and can keep that process moving along. You don't want to waste time and so on. I think Polar Cloud is very, very cool, relatively new, totally worth checking out. I'm not going to take questions on Polar Cloud because honestly, I don't have a lot of answers. I only know about it mostly from talking with them and working with David Thornburg who's working with them. So I don't have a lot of practical experience about using it myself. So that's why I don't want to get too deep into it because I'll be talking about it from in theory. All right, I only have 10 minutes left. How did that happen? It's all your fault. In the classroom, just a few different project ideas. Some of them are simple, some of them are substitution, some of them are just cool twists on traditional ideas. 3D Stanleys. We've all done the flat Stanley thing where you mail it from place to place. Come up with your own Stanley. What shape is it going to look like? What stories it's going to tell? What's the background on your Stanley? And then you make it a printable file that someone in a school district in Singapore can download your Stanley and print it out and read stories to it and have their own experience and send it back to you. It's just kind of a neat idea and a very simple way to get them creative and so on, and then also make some of these kind of global or local connections and so on and so forth. Kids love designing jewelry, and the nice thing about designing jewelry is that really gets them to start thinking about size and perspective and about measurements and precision and so on and so forth. I just did this with my daughter. My daughter's 6 years old and in kindergarten. One of the kids in her class has one of those lockets with a key, and her friend and other friend have the locket and the key, and my daughter doesn't, and she really wanted one. So she said, I want to get a necklace with a heart and a key. I said, all right, how big do you want the heart to be? She goes like this, and we measure it. And then we go into Tinkercad, and we make the heart that many millimeters. And I said, what do you want the key to look like? Do you want it to look like a regular key? She said, no, I want the key to be heart-shaped too, right? So we made another heart in Tinkercad, a smaller one, and then we copied that and turned it into a hole and made a hole in the heart. And this is what we literally sat down and designed together and then printed out, right? So she could actually have her own little heart necklace. Next day, she comes back and says, I need 7 more keys. I said, why do you need 7 more? She goes, there's 7 other kids that need the key to my heart. I'm like, all right, done. I got that, right? Yeah, how cool is that? And it's not hard, but the great thing is, it really kind of made it come alive, the idea that I can have this idea in my head and then just create it, 15 minutes, give or take. It's neat project. Math visualizations. These things are great for math. This is actually a parabola manipulative. As you move the line from the graph, the parabola actually will change as well. It is just ridiculously cool. It's great for fractions and so on. This one that I have over here is, each piece of this was, printed out. One says this is the one that says 1/2, but I also have one that's 1/3, 1/8, 1/4, 1/16, 1/32, 1/64, and so on. And if you really want some odd one, like challenge your students to come up with one that's for 7/64. Could they make one like this that'll actually fit in there? Because if you do it right, it's all going to fit in there perfectly, right? You know what I mean? So it's a fun way to kind of work on concepts like that. This is some of the stuff my teacher in my own school district did, Therese Block. So they do puzzles. They create puzzles, like Tetris-y style puzzles, for people to put on the table for people to try and solve. But they have to actually sketch the whole thing out and come up with it first on paper and do the design, and then they wind up printing it out and actually having the puzzle they can take with them and so on. They also did model rockets. Model rockets where you use the cardboard tube and the regular engine, but the kids got to come up with their own designs for the fins on the base and for the nose. And then after they did it, they actually would put a little camera on it, so while it's flying around, they could see what it looked like, what the flight path was and so on. And then they could make changes and do a different fin and see what would happen if the fins were longer, what would happen if the fins were twisted, what would happen if you did this, and keep making changes until they got the rocket that they wanted. I think she actually gave them a challenge. Can you make a rocket that launches from here and lands over here, and so on and so forth. Over there they have those Pittsco, the metric dragster. These little kits from Pittsco are ridiculously expensive. But you can do it yourself. You don't necessarily need their kits, because you can just have them design their own cars, and then all of a sudden, it doesn't necessarily have to be everybody starting with the same car. The limitation might not be like the Pinewood Derby car, everyone starts with the same block of wood. Maybe not everyone starts with the same block of wood, but everyone gets the same amount of plastic. What if everyone gets the same amount? You get 5 ounces of plastic. What's your plastic going to wind up looking like? What's your shape going to be? How crazy can you use your car, and so on and so forth, right? Really fun stuff that you can wind up doing. This is Shannon McClintock Miller. This is just basically an artifact for the end of a project. They spent 3 weeks trying to come up with a new logo, a new design for the Olympics. And they talk about what these symbols represent, what you want the Olympics to represent, what the history of the Olympics is, and so on. And they did all of their brainstorming, all of their designs, all of their concepts, and so on. And then at the end, they actually made the 3D model, and they displayed that in the school prominently for everyone to see going forward. That was just literally the final artifact, but at the same time, to be able to have sort of something concrete that everyone else can appreciate, and it to be the prompt that allows students to tell that story again and again and again of how it came to be, that makes it worthwhile as well. I feel like I'm racing really fast because I got a few other things I want to get to, and I only technically have 4 minutes left, all right? And then I'll pause and we can talk a little more. Life logo keychains. This is the kids who are kind of designing their own life logo and printing out. And once again, they got something they can hold on to. Printing cells. Cells are something that we never actually see per se. Usually, we have all these different drawings and models and so on. But describe it for kids and then let them try and come up with their own versions of it. It's actually kind of funny because a friend of mine does 3D modeling for textbooks and stuff, for anatomy textbooks and science and botany and zoology and so on. And a lot of times she's actually trying to come up with models for things that no human eye has ever seen. They know the characteristics of it, but she's literally inventing what it's going to wind up looking like. We can allow our kids to do the same kind of thing. Urban planning, this was a whole city project. Instead, they basically said, what if we took all the buildings in Boston, where it started off where people started building over here, and then they built outwards, and then they built outward. What if we were able to just lift all the buildings off and design it from scratch? What should it look like? You know what I mean? What would be the most optimal sort of design, and the conversations related to that. And then you've got things like 3D printing for social good. One of the games in the World Series this year, the first pitch was thrown out by a girl whose arm was 3D printed, which is kind of awesome. If you go on to Tinkercad, you can find plans for arms and fingers. I actually have one of the fingers right here just so you can kind of see what it looks like and so on. But what I love about it is all these people that are chiming in and saying, hey, listen, I don't have a 3D printer, but I'm missing a finger. Is there anyone who can help me out? And people are kind of connecting along those lines. And the best part about it is this is not the kind of thing where it's just a kid downloading a file and clicking file print, because this specific one won't work for anybody else other than the one it was designed for. Because if somebody lost a finger, they might have lost it here, 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 or here. You know what I mean? So adjustments need to be made so that it'll actually work right for that specific person. There are a few different websites that will actually connect you and your classroom to specific kids, where they will give you the measurements, they will give you what their issues are, what their problems are, and they get to actually make the adjustments and the design so you can give them an arm that's customized for that purse. That's the powerful part of it. That's the transformative part of it, not just downloading the file and then assembling it Lego style and giving it to somebody else. That feels good, but the kids aren't learning a lot from it. You know what I mean? So it's making, and also not only that, but if you're gonna go ahead and make an arm for this kid, find out what they're into. If they're into Frozen, you can make it Frozen themed, right? Do it in like a clear sort of whitish sort of style and add stars and snowflakes and so on and so forth. And that right there is go crossing over from STEM into STEAM, isn't it? Right? And so long as you're doing it for that little girl who's really into Frozen, you could also do a doll that looks like her. This is one of the things I think is actually uber cool. This is a teacher out in Texas who, instead of doing, she finds people who are getting 3D printed limbs, and she actually scales things down and makes the same limb for a doll, like an American Girl doll, and gives them so they can have, something that actually is exactly the same as they are. And then, if you really want to get completely out of the box, you go to something called Project Unicorn. This little girl is brilliant and amazing and wonderful. She said, well, why on earth do I need an arm with a thumb and 5 fingers? Why can't I be awesome and be a superhero instead? And so she designed this, where it has different height. This was the original prototype model. This is the 3D printed new version of it that has a CO2 tank that attaches to it. And whenever she wants to, she can shoot out a cloud of glitter. And she can shoot out other sorts of things and just make the world a little bit more magical. She calls it Project Unicorn. She's done like 3 or 4 different designs of it. But honestly, why are we so fixated on this whole thumb and 4 fingers sort of concept when it could be anything? It could be anything that we might want to, right? I'll give you just a few final tips and then I'm going to shut up and let you guys come on up here if you want to. Calibration is 100% key if you're going to be doing 3D printing. You were asking about some problems that you were having with prints and so on. I will tell you this. More often than not, it's an issue related to calibration. Unfortunately, calibration could be X, it could be Y, it could be Z, it could be this. What I will recommend is, if you're having trouble with calibration, so this right here is a 20 millimeter calibration cue. The idea is online, it's 20 by 20 by 20, 20 millimeters on every side. Print it out, use your digital calipers. If it's not exactly 20, you got something to fix, right? Even if it's just a tiny little bit off, right? You take those calibration things, there's a little tugboat, you get those calibration cubes and so on, go on Facebook, go to the 3D Printer Enthusiast Club, and you say, I just printed this out, this is what it looks like, what's wrong? They are like CSI forensics design. I mean, it's unbelievable the way they will break it all down for you and give you some suggestions for what you can do. You may wind up seeing that your prints start looking like this, fuzzy and weird. But more often than not, it's happening right there. If you haven't changed any settings, no one's bumped into it, and it's starting to look fuzzy like that, what's probably happened is you got moisture. PLA and ABS will actually absorb moisture from the air, and then it will wind up getting little air particles or water particles inside your plastic, and then when you heat it up and print it, it's not going to be dead even, which is why they say all the plastic that you're not using, you should put in some sort of a storage container that is going to keep it dry. It could be a regular plastic tote. If you take a regular plastic tote like that, throw in all those little silica packets that you're not eating and you're throwing away. You fill it up with that and it'll keep your ABS and your PLA and so on nice and dry. If it does wind up getting moisture and so on, don't throw it out. Don't throw it out, because all you need to do is put it into the oven for a very short amount of time on low heat, and that can dry out. Or, you guys do hunting around here, right? So I'm assuming you know somebody that has one of those, right? The jerky creators, it's a dehydrator. Literally, all it does is suck air, moisture out of a small area of space and spit it out. That's it. So you put your PLA into that, and it'll get it right back to normal. It'll get you right as rain in an hour or so, right? The last couple things. Don't overfill your bed. This right there is what you saw on Pinterest, okay? This is what you got when you tried to make it, right? What happens is, the trouble is, the idea, I understand how sexy it could be to just say I'm going to print out 50 gears, I'll just put 50 of them on there, and then I don't need to keep popping them off and starting it again. The only trouble is, if anything goes wrong, you have now ruined 5 hours of printing instead of 1 hour of printing. You've lost this much plastic instead of this much. I have found almost all the time, unless everything is 100% perfect and dialed in, just print one, and then print another, and then print another. You're going to wind up saving yourself more time in the long run. Always watch the first few layers. When you click start, stop, stare at it, make sure it's sticking and sticking well. So if something isn't working well, because if it doesn't stick, it's going to get screwed up at some point in the print job. Make sure the first few layers, measure carefully, make sure that they're right, and also keep in mind, if like the heart keychain, you're going to have a heart that's going to go into another piece, it can't be exactly the same size. If it is, it's going to be too tight for you to push things in. So just keep that in mind. Drop either increase the size of the hole just a little bit, or drop the size of that so that you've got just a little bit of tolerance. And the last thing is really closely watch your settings. Like I said, the place where most people go wrong is in the settings, in the infill, and the speed of the printer, and so on and so forth. More often than not, most of the problems that you have can be fixed by just adjusting simple settings in there, and the people in those Facebook groups will wind up helping you. All right, I'm just going to tell you, I have a whole bunch of other slides. We didn't even get to the dual extrusion piece. We can talk just for a quick minute after that, but there's a few different ways to do it. All this other stuff is on the slideshow that I already gave you, so you can look more into it later. If you want to come up and see some of these models and talk about them, feel free. And that is all the time that I have to keep you in those seats. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I hope you guys got some good information. And like I said, if you have specific questions, come on up and